His name is Billboard Chris. I didn't even ask his last name because that's not the part that matters. The part that matters is that you've seen his work. You've seen this guy in Canada who wears a sign talking about simple things like, here's the definition of the word dad. Putting up a billboard that says, I heart JK Rowling, of course, the author of the Harry Potter books, who has been told she is a TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, because she believes women are women and men are men. Billboard Chris is a guy. And I had seen his work, but I had not had a chance to meet the man until I found him at CPAC. And Chris, it's good to see you. It's good to have you here. Is the work that you do based on this gender identity conversation, or was this about trying to start conversations prior?
I learned all about this child abuse going on. The fact that we are giving children drugs which stop their bodies going into puberty. We're giving them cross-sex hormones at these gender clinics at children's hospitals, and even doing surgeries on kids. And I'm a dad of 2 girls, and I just got tired of this trajectory that society was on. We should not be trying to change the sex of children. That's totally insane. If this was affecting 1 out of 50,000 kids, that would be one thing. But it's affecting 1 out of 20. And it's mostly adolescent girls who are entering into puberty, who are getting caught up in a social contagion or a craze that teaches them that just because they don't conform to stereotypes, that they must be born in the wrong body. So I had put up this billboard in Vancouver, very controversial, very hateful apparently, because it had a big red heart on it saying, I love JK Rowling. It lasted 1 day because a Vancouver politician said it was hate speech and they took it down.
I love JK Rowling was called hate speech in Canada.
Yes. So they took it down after 1 day. This news went viral, and I leveraged all the outrage into a campaign and put up billboards all across the U.S.
What is it that this politician said was hateful? Was it the word I, the actual heart, or the word JK Rowling?
It must be the words JK Rowling, because she has had the audacity to say things like we shouldn't be sterilizing kids and we shouldn't be sending male rapists into women's prisons.
Talking to Billboard Chris, and you can find out about him at billboardchris.com. So you do this, and you raise the money, and you put these billboards across America.
Yeah.
At what moment do you get branded by others as a domestic terrorist or branded as a hater of children? You're personally going to lead children to suicide, and that conversation seems to be a default shield for them, that you can't notice the problems with the idea of children being able to decide their own medical futures and the cleaving of children away from their parents, because the parents can decide, if children can decide their own medical, they can decide so many things about their lives. What came after that, and what was your response to it?
I knew the whole world was going to come for me from the far left, so immediately it was overwhelming. There was so much hate. I was worried that people were going to come to my house, so I was actually sleeping on my couch for about the first week because I was getting dozens of death threats and all sorts of mayhem.
What does a death threat sound like? Was it a call? Was it an email? Was it a note?
Everything. I don't really worry about them because I know they're just empty threats, but it's phone calls. I have a website now. I had my phone number on there for the longest time. I'm not hiding anything. I did everything in full transparency. People were doxing my address. People were even doxing my wife where she works. She's a teacher, telling all their hundreds of thousands of followers to call the school because she must be terrible just because she's married to me.
Right.
But I was prepared for that. When I became aware of this, I knew I had to do something because I wasn't going to look back at my life in 40 years and say I knew about the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history and I did nothing. So I came prepared for war. And I'm in this until this child abuse is a thing of history. So I traveled all across Canada, starting in October of 2020, with these signs on that I wear. I'm like a human billboard because they wouldn't let me put up any signs in Canada. So I said, well, they can say it's hate speech, but it's not. They can take down my billboard, but they can't take a sign off my back. So I started going outside, leaving the echo chambers of social media, and having one conversation at a time with Canadians, knowing that if I never quit, and just spent hour after hour out on the streets. I go to university campuses, I go to busy downtown centers. I knew it would grow into podcasts and media, and events would happen. And it's been proven right. And when the borders opened up, all of my trips now are into the U.S.
One of the signs that you wear is the definition of the word dad.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's Merriam-Webster or dictionary.com, wherever you got the definition. You wear that on a college campus?
Oh, yeah.
And what is the response you get?
So the definition of a dad in 2023 is a human male who protects his kids from gender ideology. That's the sign that I wear. All throughout North America, wherever I go, I get approximately 90% support from people. University campuses, it's a little different because primarily the people pushing this ideology or who have fallen for this are young women. Mm-hmm. It's young girls who are caught up in this craze who now want to be boys.
Yes.
But I have this radical idea, Tony, that tomboys are not actual boys. I think they're beautiful girls, and there's no right way to be a boy or a girl. And if a girl's more masculine or a boy's more effeminate, so what? And I'll say this to these people who are yelling at me and screaming at me, and they get so confused because I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to be some bigot against gender nonconformity. But what they don't understand is they know that stereotypes are bad. I'll say we shouldn't put these kids in some stereotypical box. They know that, and they all agree with it. And with those people, that's a great conversation, because now they're confused. I've created this moment of cognitive dissonance where they have these two competing ideas going on in their head, and they're going to have to go home and figure out what my actual views are.
So if I were to be listening to that and try and break that down into a more layman speak, you're not arguing that a boy might be more feminine or a girl might be more masculine, talking about stereotypes.
Right.
We're discussing the idea of whether or not we allow children to mutilate themselves and we somehow enable adults to engage the mutilation. It's a very different subject indeed.
That's right. So there's the surgery aspect to it, which is mutilation. But with tens of thousands of kids, even before they're getting surgeries, they're getting a drug. It's normally called Lupron, and it's a chemical castration drug used previously for pedophiles. It's approved for prostate cancer, endometriosis in women, but it stops puberty. So the boys don't produce any testosterone, girls won't produce estrogen. Without that, their secondary sex characteristics don't develop. So girls' breasts won't grow, boys' penises won't grow, girls' hips don't get wider. It's causing them to lose bone density. That's one of the side effects. The FDA came out with a warning saying it causes brain swelling, permanent vision loss. There's all sorts of issues. But think about this for a second. We are stopping the physical development of children with an off-label cancer drug. That's insane. We're then giving them the opposite sex's hormones. And whether you think that you're a believer in God or whether you think that we evolved, none of this makes sense. If you believe in God, you're saying God made us wrong. If you believe in evolution, this movement teaches that 1 billion years of the process of natural selection has failed. And for the first time in human history, in this little 10-year window, a pharmaceutical company is here to help our children be who they really are. This is absurd.
So you discussed with me earlier before we started that those who favor what they will horrifically determine or term as gender-affirming care, the ones who consider themselves the loving, the kind, the decent, they're also the people who broke your arm.
Yes, I've been assaulted approximately 25 times. That's if you include people spitting at me. I've been punched numerous times. I've been attacked on the streets of Montreal by Antifa, 5 or 6 guys, one woman as well. And instantly I was punched in the face, punched in the back of the head. My signs were ripped off of me. My body cam was stomped on in the middle of the street. And I was upset I lost my body cam because I wanted footage of these guys. So I pulled out my phone and I filmed the last half of this attack. And a guy picked up a large traffic cone, which I wasn't too worried about because it's plastic, but the base on those things is pretty dense. And he swung it at my face 4 times. I blocked it each time, but on the second blow, it broke my forearm. So that's what happens when you have a simple message that children cannot consent to puberty blockers.
Talking to Billboard Chris. Find him online, Billboard Chris, CHRIS.com. Before I let you go, I have actually engaged debate with my production team, my program director, my executive producer. Am I going too much into this very subject? Am I going too far? This is a subject that is not weekly for me. This is near daily as there's a new conversation and a new story and a new attack. And in my beloved Indiana, the ACLU of Indiana is infuriated with the state for engaging legislation, getting it through the Senate, working its way through the Indiana House on these subjects. It's the slate of hate, as it is referred to. The American Civil Liberties Union being a much different organization than it was some 30 years ago. I only come to the conclusion that not only am I not talking about it too much, I'm not talking about it enough. Because whether you're an American or whether you're Canadian, how you're addressing the subject is the conversation of humanity. What is it that we are actually allowing to happen here? Never mind the madness that you cannot change your gender. Never mind the madness that children can't be given this agency over themselves regarding their medical needs or really anything else. Children need to be protected more often than not from themselves. This is a humanity conversation. Do you discuss with people how they think a society thrives when children are made prey? And am I wrong for utilizing the terminology in your view, made prey?
Not at all. I see this as a cult that has permeated all of society, and they've had free reign to grow without any restrictions because it's a neat trick. The movement for gay rights was about people who are sexually attracted to the same sex. Those gay rights were won. As soon as all those rights were won, all of these LGBTQ organizations turned the focus to so-called trans rights, and they've conflated these two things as being the same. And because they've done that, no one dares speak out against it, because then you're an anti-LGBT bigot. None of the politicians would speak out against it, and this gets a bit complicated, this whole subject. But really, people are waking up now. They get that this has nothing to do with your sexuality. This is all about a denial of reality itself, and it's medical abuse. If an adult wants to do something with their body, that's one thing. But we know from all the historical studies, the kids just grow out of this. And almost all of these kids would grow out of it if just left alone. But it's the most vulnerable children that are being preyed upon. It's kids with autism. Half these kids are on the autism spectrum. And it's kids who have suffered abuse.
Do you have data on that?
I do. So the Tavistock is the biggest gender clinic in the world. It's being shut down. But it's in England, and out of a sample of 1,038 kids, 35%, per their own statistics, 35% had moderate to severe autism. If you include the mild cases, it goes about 50%. We have a whistleblower from the St. Louis Gender Clinic, Jamie Reed. She describes herself as politically left of Bernie Sanders. She's a queer woman married to a trans man. She just blew the whistle on all of this. She worked for a gender clinic in Missouri for 4 years. She agrees with everything we're saying. All these kids are struggling with something. A lot of the girls have been sexually abused. Guess how you're feeling when you've been sexually abused as a girl? You're not loving being a girl right now. And if you give these kids an escape route, some of them are going to take it up. So we just got to get back to reality, tell our children they're beautiful just as they are, and end this cultish nonsense, because there's no such thing as a child born in the wrong body. That's an abusive thing to say to a child.
I'm impressed, very much so, and I look forward to seeing more of what you do. BillboardChris.com. I will just note that on this conversation of LGBTQ, I thought I was the only person, certainly the only person in conservative radio, discussing the fact that just the letters are so abusive to people who are gay and lesbians, who actually fought for their rights. If we go back to Stonewall and those actual real fights to be able to hold hands while walking down the street in Greenwich Village, they're now being told that if they don't support what we're discussing here about the mutilation of children, they're not really gay and they're not really lesbian. They somehow lose their rights, and we take these letters, or they've taken these letters to co-opt to them. And yes, and I'm thrilled to hear somebody else talking about this, how they've turned what was a real struggle into a political movement to move an ideology that is wholly radical.
That's right. And historically, a lot of these kids with gender dysphoria, back when this was rare,
right,
a lot of them grew up to be gay. Now they're sterilizing these kids.
BillboardChris.com. It's an important subject. I'm glad we had the chance to talk about it. Good to meet you, seeing you here at CPAC, Conservative Political Action Conference, and our coverage presented by Relay Indiana. Greatly appreciate them. Chris, thank you.
Thanks, Tony.
Pleasure.